Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Harebrained Games. Today we're going to do a review of an old-time game, and when I say old-time, it's been out for a few years, called Days of Ire, Budapest 1956. So those of you long-time watchers would know that a couple years ago I did a review of its successor, Knights of Fire, and for some reason I never got around to playing the original. I had a chance recently to do so, so let's take a look and see what's in the box. Look at what comes in Days of Ire, Budapest, 1956. What you're going to get is, of course, the main player map. This is set up to begin the demonstration, so some of the pieces are already on the board in their appropriate position. Each of these is a picture representation, some of the hotspot areas in Budapest wherein conflict occurred between the fighting forces. You also have fighters. These guys are going to help you, ladies and gentlemen, are going to help you in your quest to hold back the forces of evil. Here you have the forces of evil in the form of the militia, and this is a sniper militia. You also have Russian tanks that are powerful but somewhat more rare. Morale track. If you lose too much morale, you do lose the game. Support track, which will help you as far as whether events trigger or not. And then you have your 7 days. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then evaluate and end the game based on how well you did. Now, there are different cards. Now, there's two modes of play. Let's go over those. You've got your standard rule book. It looks thick, but actually only the first few pages are the starting rule book. The rest of it is all very, very valuable historical information to give you a lot about the conflict you are going to be simulating. And then you have two opportunities, Zhukov rule set and the conflict rule set. We're going to be doing the Zhukov rule set. This is a everybody against the AI, wherein you will all be playing for the freedom fighters, the revolutionaries. In the other mode, one player is going to take on the role of the forces of evil, the State Protection Authority, and the Russians, and then the others are going to contend against them. Now, what's different is that there are different sets like State Protection Forces and certain event headline cards that are going to be specific to this mode of play. Those are not going to be dealt with, but you can ascertain from that what you will, that there's a connection there between card and playset. But then we're going to focus on this. And so you will have events, major events, and minor events. And then you'll have this AI driving deck. These are the cards that are going to be played. They're going to be shuffled and played throughout the game. These will determine whether good events happen or bad events happen, how they happen, how the board is going to change and configure itself, etc. So with that, every player is going to get they're going to take revolutionary cards, and these are going to give you information about, first they give you icons. These icons are going to drive your ability to get rid of events, because too many events on the board going on is one of the loss factors. And then each player is going to get 5 cards to start with. They're all represented with art. Very, very nice art. I like the art, very distinguished. They have actions that you can take with the cards. So, well, I should be very careful. They have effects that you can play. Some of them require that you spend an action, some don't. And then again, that's what you got. You've got action tokens, movement, and then of course you get this. This is the token I could not understand, but I have a feeling that it's the if you lose, you have to stand on your head and send all of your Pop-Tarts up into the alien spaceship's exhaust system. That's how I'm interpreting it anyway. Alright, enough of that silliness. Let's get into an example of gameplay. Okay, let's take a look at how you play Days of Ire, Budapest, 1956. Thankfully, as I always adore, the manual has all of the reference rules to go through. You have the Soviet phase. You will then go to the revolutionary phase. Green is good, red is bad. Then you've got the spa phase for the facial and the mud bath. No, not really. And then, victory check. If not, you keep going. The object of the game is to win. There are certain ways to win as either side. If you are the revolutionaries, which we will be, then if you ever clear off all of the militia and the Soviet tanks, you have achieved victory. Also, at the end of the game, you have to have 4 or less events. If there are 5 events ongoing in this city, you lose. For the Soviets, it's the inverse of that. Well, as not really, but there's the idea that if you get 4 injuries on a player, so every player can take up to 3 hits. If you ever have 4 hits on a player, 5 in solo, then you're going to lose. So you need to make sure that you, as the player, do not sustain remarkably bad injuries during the course of affairs. Also, anytime the morale track hits 0, you instantly lose. Instantly. Like instant rice, except unkind. And then at the end of the game, if the Soviets have 5 events out on the board, they win. Okay, enough chit-chat. Let's get rolling. First off, we're going to do 4 events, not 3, unless by going to 3 you also go past to 4, not 5, lest you go 1 too many. All right, we look at this and we say, okay, this event, we check our support track. Is our support track either here or on the color of the event? Well, this is multicolored, so it's going to trigger. Now, based on what phase we're in phase 1, so we're going to do this red portion. If we were in the armed uprising portion, we would do this side. And then, of course, if we were towards the end, we would do this side. One player may draw 2 cards. All players gain 1 extra free movement this day. Oh, yeah. Zhukov is kind of our friend sometimes. Huh. Well, all right. All right. So we're going to have 2 cards added to these guys. You can have a maximum of 10. And so here we go. Look at that. We're cooking with gas now. All players gain 1 free extra movement, and that's going to be pretty cool. Next card is red. Because it's not there yet, you'll notice that it's not there. We don't do the event. This event would generally be bad, but we do have to shift the track. And now we are in a position where if a red event comes up, well, then we're going to have to read the text and do what it says. Okay, so this one says, this is kind of an Omni card, so activate 2 fighters anywhere. Oh, that's awesome. Well, I might as well activate these. All right. And we flip that over, and look at that. Margit and Valeria inactive. So what does she do? She gives us food, and she gives us Molotov cocktails. So that's quite the essential drink. And you know what? Let's just do the same thing over here where we have our other player. And, ooh, -1 spa total unit strength in this location. I like that. That's good. Okay, inactive. Cool. So we're good. And the final event, we can dish... haha. We forgot the important thing. Silly goose. All right, so this is the place the top card of the major event deck on and execute. So let's roll back a bit. Silly me. All right, we're going to keep those, but we're going to do this. This works out well. So we're going to take this event, and we're going to government occupied anywhere. Okay. So anywhere in there's, let's just put it here. It's Sapel. All right, so that's an event we're going to have to contend with. Not sure I should have put it there since it's already kind of protected with militia, but what the heck. All right, so we got that. This card says we take the top event and discard it, because that's what that symbol means. That just kind of makes sure we don't go through all the top events. And then, now we do this. This is the other one we're going to discard. And so, it also says do an event on Astoria. All right, and finally, ooh, shift morale towards us. All right, morale shifts towards us. That's good. I like that. Thank you, Zukov. You're my friend to the end. And then, of course, its symbol says to place the top card of the minor event deck if the location is empty. So we're going to take this minor event deck and on Kossuth Square. Okay, so as you can see, we are nowhere near at 4 events or less. So Zukov has given us a couple benefits, but for the most part, he's also done us some disfavor, which is what he is prone to do. Now it's our turn. Now, because we're playing a 2-player game, we have certain things to help us. Each player can take up to 2 actions after movement, or in between movement, whatever. And they get free movement. Now, notice that we also get an extra free movement, one extra free movement this day, so that's good. So there we go. We're going to add those tokens to help remind us. So we can take the actions now. The first thing we can do before is move. Now, do I need to move anywhere? Well, is there anything we can do? What are we looking for? Why would we want to move? Well, there are certain places that we're trying to get rid of these events, and we need to look and see what we can pull off to make that happen. Here we have food, but we're going to need 2 more food, and we're going to need a boombox to basically help us. We have an aid, and we don't really have any food that's going to help us. And so, you know what, we're going to leave that one right now. We're going to see if we can move somewhere that's going to give us an opportunity. Now, we move along the lines, and our first movement is free every turn. After that, you have to discard a card to move any farther. We just happen to be fortunate to have 2 free movements. So then, could we do that? It's not really helpful. But here, okay, so that, oh man, that's number of radios times the number of event cards in play. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We'd have to come up with 6 boom boxes here. I'm not liking that. I'm really not. Is there anything we can do here? There is, because we have, well, we don't have that. We have food. You know what? Yes, we're going to do this. We're going to use one of our movements, and we're going to go here, and then we're going to use our another free movement to go here. All right. Now that's going to help us out. So there we go. Now we have 2 actions to perform, and we can move in between them, but again, it costs a card. So what we're going to do is we're going to activate a fighter. That's one of the things we can do, is activate a fighter. Matter of fact, let me show you. You can activate a fighter, which means that they're in play and able to help you. You can resolve an event using these and gain a reward, so it costs an event to resolve it. You can attack militia if you've got some weaponry. That's kind of cool. But you really want to get them in 3s so that you can get an extra card if you want. You can get rid of a tank, but we're not anywhere near that. You can use a card or active fighter ability, cards with actions. So you don't, yeah. So that's basically, there's a lot of stuff going on where, unless the card actually says action or it's a bona fide action, you can do a lot of free stuff. And you can give or take cards, or you can draw a card. So anyway, so what we're going to do here is we're going to look and go, okay, what do we have? We're going to activate this here. So look, so now we've got Imre Colds in play. And what does he do? He gives us 2 free food. That solves one of these. So then we go, well, do we have what else we need? Aid is nice because it's very flexible. You can use that for something you're missing. Is there anything else that we can use? Well, there is. And this is kind of interesting because if I use this for the tokens, then I don't get to use my special ability to draw 2 cards. So I can do this. And now I've got food, so I'm going to use my last action, and I'm going to resolve this event. Okay, so then we've got the food. We've got, oh, we don't have the weaponry. So we're going to change this to use the pistol, because that's a weapon. Duh. Show me the rabbits, George. Okay, and let's go ahead and, oh man. We could have activated it. We're not going to, because we have a special ability coming up. All right, so we've got a matching radio, we've got food, and we've got pistol. We have now completed this action. We discard these cards, and then we resolve the special thing we get, which is to activate 1 fighter in this location. So without having to use an action, we have been able to now activate this particular character. We'll set those off to the side, and there we go. We have now finished our movement, our actions, and we're set for this player. Now we're going to move over to this player. This is good because now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 actions instead, which again makes this easier to accomplish. So now we decide from here what we're going to do. Again, we have movement, we've got food, we need radio. Where could we go to do the most awesomeness that we can? Okay. Once per turn, move him to any location. Interesting. So this is a tricky one. Oh my gosh. 1, 2, well, so we look and see what we can pull off. We actually do have the weapons. Do we have enough first aid kits, though? We do not. However, we have transportation, and we can use this special. This doesn't cost anything to move to any location and take fighters with us. Is that valuable now? We're not really in a position where it's going to take a long ways to get to where we want to go. So we're going to go ahead and transportation, medical aid, and radio. Yeah, let's do this. So we're going to move. We're going to do our free movement. Doesn't cost anything. And then we're going to resolve this. All right. So we're going to pay the transportation cost here with this card. Again, we don't have any fighters helping us here. And then we're going to pay the radio cost. And again, not necessarily saying this is the best strategy. There's some pretty powerful things you can do here. And we're going to use first aid to get one of these 3 symbols. We have now accomplished all the things to fix the fire in the National Museum in Astoria. Ta-da! So what do we get? What is our precious ointment? Select 2 cards from the discard pile to drop back to your hand. All right, so we might have gotten rid of 3 cards, but we get to pick up others from the discard pile. So there we go. So that's our we've moved. We've done an action to resolve that. Now we're going to go ahead and decide what else. Okay, we're going to do this. Is a bad idea, but we're going to do this. I'm going to use my free movement to move here. I'm going to discard a card to move an additional space here. Yes, it's done. Yes, we're next to something. And then we're going to use this action to whatever, like activate that troop. Why, you ask? Well, you'll find out, because it's just once we resolve. All right, so we are now done. We have done the revolutionary turn. Everyone's done their actions. Not saying they're bright, just saying they did them. All right, so then everything happens. And we didn't go into any tanks. Tanks are interesting because if you do an action where there's a tank, they react. They're not an action more than they're a reaction. So if I happen to have moved here and done any sort of action at all, the tanks would fire at me. On a 1 to 3, I'd take a hit. In this case, I avoided them. Yes, I did. Okay, so then we draw tracks. On the number on the morale track is 3, which means that we're going to get to draw 3 cards and distribute them as evenly as we can. So we can't just go, hey, you get all 3. No, they have to be back and forth. In this case, we can give 2 cards here and 1 card here to like revitalize our efforts and our energy. We can go ahead and throw that back now because our movement phase is done. All right, now we have the spa phase. All right, so move militia if a player is adjacent. Is there any militia? Yes, there is. So these guys go here to where there is a player, or yeah. So move over there. And then here, the militia, there's nothing nearby. So there you go. So we have now set it up. And then we move snipers towards the closest player. So 1 there. Sniper's already there. Sniper's here. We're going to move him here to try to get him in position in the city. We move them in because they're going to try and mess with us. Oh, yes, they are. Then, yes, place militia or sniper. 1 militia on all reinforcement locations. So, or if none remaining, a sniper at Astoria. So these are the reinforcement locations are here. And so we're going to move 1 militia on all reinforcement locations. Again, not the brightest place. 1 here, 1 here, and 1 here. All right, so there you go. So now we're set up here. And then we attack. Roll everywhere where there's a target. If there is a player or a fighter or a revolutionary tank or a barricades you can add into play, and they will basically help buffer damage from you. But then we're going to go every place where there's anything going on. So here we have the sniper. All right. So strength is 9. Anywhere, yes. So we count up the strength. The strength is 3. Here, roll 2 dice. If any of them are less, then they take a hit. I believe it's active fighters, so I gotta double check. I should know. Give me a second. Yeah, it's active fighters, so we don't need to worry about this here because nobody's active. Here, on the other hand, we have a strength of 2. So we have 2 active fighters and the player, so we're gonna roll here. Oh, man. Okay. So that's not what I was hoping for. So if the smaller number that you roll is equal to or below the strength, you deal a hit. And if the sum is also lower, then you deal 2 hits. So we're gonna go ahead and get rid of food friend here because we could take a damage and assign it to our dear player here, but 4 damage and the game is over. So we're gonna go ahead and just risk having the fighter gone. Okay, and then you go around to the other places where you can see, not an active fighter, an active fighter. Oh my gosh. So bye-bye, active fighter. Alright, nothing here, nothing here. Resolve this. Not resolve, not resolve. So 3, 4, 5, 6. Alright. So, ouch. Of course, 3, 4. So 2 hits. So we're just going to give 2 hits to our friend Blue here. That's halfway to death. There are ways to recover, but man, not good. So I didn't say I was smart. I just said I was showing you the game. And that's it. That's the end of the spa phase. If there's ever a congregation of strength of 9 or more, then it reduces the morale. And that's towards the enemy. And again, if it gets to 0, you die, it ends. And that's a whole round of Days of Ire Budapest 1956. Again, you're going to be playing over and over this same sequence, and then as the days go by, events will change, things will happen. Once you get to the end game, which is not necessarily. Again, if any player ever hits 4 health, or takes 4 hits, or you have the lack of militia or Soviet tanks, and one side or the other wins. But generally speaking, the victory comes at the end when you decide if you can take out enough locations and such. So anyway, there you go. There's an example of Days of Ire, Budapest 1956. Now let's get into my final thoughts. Alright, final thoughts on Days of Ire, Budapest 1956. As always, we go over the cons, then the pros, then my final thoughts, if any. So cons, I would say that generally speaking, as far as game styles or game mechanisms go, Days of Ire there's nothing new under the sun here. It's, for a game about revolution, it's not entirely revolutionary, even back for its time. As far as co-ops go, generally speaking, whenever there's a co-op game, and I'm gonna be honest, I'm not generally a fan of co-op games, but they've grown on me over the years. When you have your pandemics and your games of that, what you're really doing is playing a glorified whack-a-mole. The key is to mask that in such a way that the reality that that's what you're doing is absorbed into the immersion of the game's style, whatever you can pull off to make it unique and original, so that you're not just feeling like a glorified accountant with a colorful ledger adding and removing cube-like things from spots. Days of Ire doesn't necessarily break the mold and achieve that spectacularly, but it goes a long way and makes great strides for making you forget based on some of the positives that we'll go into when I get to the positives. The other thing is, this is not a deep strategic game. This is a pretty light game when it comes to the actual things you do per se. It's generally pretty light. That might be a pro for some people going, hey, let me introduce you to a game, casual gamer, although the topic might not be something you'd mesh well with that. And also, this is not a game with a Disney fairy tale ending for long. Yes, you can win in this game, unlike its successor, but your happily ever after will last you about a week. Historically, playing the Hungarians, you will win only to lose. When you lose afterwards, you will lose badly historically. You will be part of something that has a 0% chance of winning. And the reality of that isn't set in during this game, so you can sort of skip that in your mind, but it's made painfully clear in its successor. Victory conditions are tailored such that you will feel wins and losses just fine, so it's not like you have to go like, oh man, like, what's the point kind of thing. But, don't be, but for those of us who are like, I know what happens next, you won't be fooled. Basically, if you can do it, then focus on just the rising up and the showing of your resilience as the Hungarian populace. All right, enough of the cons. Let's get into the pros. Now, the rule book is worth reading even if you don't play the game. The rules are tightly described, good examples, not exhaustive, not too terse. The last half is all about immersing you in the history and the setting of the stage of the game that you're about to play. It does a great job of splitting the modes, because there are 2 modes, into 2 logical separate branches so that you have as little overlap as possible. Reduces confusion in common areas like how you set up the game versus one side versus the other. So excellent job on that. As a solo experience, I think it's top notch. I would gladly play it solo equally well with any other player count. The artwork and the art style are they're unique. I appreciate that they used real photographs, and something I don't always appreciate in games, but using real photographs of the locations where you're going to be having conflict, and to do that it just gives you a sense of that's really where that happened. That's really a photo of where this is taking place. At the same time, they use a different art style for the revolution cards that you play in your hand, which at first seemed like it would cause some dissonance for me artistically, but it doesn't. It's almost a relief to just have that comicalized view of the cards afforded to you. The game also does a great job, despite the fact that this is a dark time and just a dark time in a lot of ways all over the globe, but particularly here in Budapest. It does a great job of providing glimmers of hope during gameplay. This is something that I really appreciate. In a lot of games, what you have is the deck of pain. And that's where, or you have games that sandwich your pain. Let me explain. So you start with some left hooks, like, oh, here's your first set of cards. Do 5 of these things that'll make your life miserable and hard. Mess with the board, ruin stuff, destroy stuff, randomly, whatever. You don't know what's going to happen. And then it gives you a chance to sort of get back up off the carpet and like, okay, my turn to be awesome. And then usually at the end they'll give you some, it pounds you with the right cross at the end of the round, and then you just basically repeat these rounds until you're dead or marginally successful. I like that there are allies in every location. Because it gives you a little bit of a breath of fresh air going, I'm not just going into the lion's den here. I've got people on my side here as I, the player, am moving around. In the middle of, snipers and militia and all that. So you're not alone. You don't feel alone as a player here. The Zhukov deck, the deck that you actually start off and saying, this is Zhukov, this is Soviet, and you're taking basically the 4 cards and, playing them. They're not, it's a mix of both helpful and harmful. It's not a source of constant dread. It's more of a potpourri of good and bad, a mixing and matching of good and bad things, so that you're not, again, having to just feel dread. This is my happy place, dread. Something I just don't like in cooperative games. It's one of the reasons I really don't like them, is I just feel like it's, sadness, soul searching. Anyway, there's lots of equipment and things in these cards, and so you're not starved for opportunity with paltry supplies like, oh, I've only got 2 things, I know I'm going to take it, I've got 3 monsters and only 1 weapon kind of thing. You don't have to worry about that here. You're going to have opportunities to get cards, to refill, to feel like you can at least make a difference every turn. The mix and match of completing objectives works well here too, and then it offers you bonuses as well. And if you move over and you're able to accomplish and basically solve this objective in this location, usually a nice boon. It's nice to see these little boons, these glimmers of hope in the middle of a raging dogfight that makes this game less bleak and dreary than it might have, at least for a while until its successor. The other thing that hits home to me is that this game has real faces, real people, except for the players themselves. You're never given the chance in this game to distantiate yourself from the fact that this token, this person, this that you're dealing with represents a real human that existed. And that is something I have pined for years for games that did that, that really broke that gap between this token represents an entire army versus this. I really wonder who this guy was. The thing is, now that I've got my wish, I also have to realize that I should have been careful what I wished for in a lot of ways, just because of how it does bring home the reality. Even for with simple, not entirely wildly new gameplay underneath it, there's a distinct humanness that's in this game. Games like Grizzled or this War of Mine that kind of try to do similar things, they focus on the psychological war to make it the marquee attraction. Here, the humanness atop the reality is the star of the show. Now, before we go into my final thoughts, I want to talk to you about both of these, because now that I've got a chance to see both, I can more appropriately speak on behalf of both Days of Ire and Knights of Fire. For one, I recommend playing them in the order and not the opposite order, because that's really where you're going to get an understanding, and that understanding is going to do a lot for you. In the successor, I felt like there was an abstraction of the human connection that was prevalent more so than in Days of Ire. I think that the successor, Knights of Fire, as I said, it deals with much more of the groundwork, the gritty, nitty-gritty wartime squad-level detail, but without the connection to this person fighting in this location, as stuff. And honestly, the successor, the Knights of Fire, is dark. It's dark. It's even more overwhelmingly an unfair fight. And that's kind of sad, because you're like, you play Days of Ire, you feel this. If you win, you're like, yes, we did it. We brought things to the table. Now that table's going to get run over by a Soviet tank. You're going to lose. This whole series is all about losing in the reality of the situation. It's just a matter of, you're having a Dunkirk moment where you're just helping your brave peers escape death. Days of Ire at least provides a glimmer of hope of what could be, what could have been, an impasse, a ceasefire, a compromise, some justice. Knights of Fire is the 2-ton hammer that comes in before freedom gets out of hand and crushes without mercy, leaving you the task of staving off the whirlwind long enough to get people to safety before being swallowed in this chasm of militarized evil intent. It's definitely play them in order, like I said, but for me, the first game, Days of Ire, brings home the faces of war. The second kind of pulls the camera back a bit more. Neither's wrong, but Days of Ire had a much greater psychological impact by doing so the way that it did. So in summary, Days of Ire is ground level real. And so you were looking history in the eye and realizing how bleak and terrible those days were, with the glimmers of resolve that I think make it from just being a mega downer. I think I would choose Days of Ire over Knights of Fire for that reason, although I don't find either one of them detrimental or flawed. I don't feel like I'm playing Days of Ire more than I feel like I'm simulating the story. A story of resilience, a story of resolve, a story of self-sacrifice. If you can close off yourself from the subsequent events to get a feeling of temporary victory and feel okay with that, that's great. For me, I have a rare moment of emotion with this game that in an otherwise jaded life that I can't quite put my finger on. Typically, I'm pretty emotionless, but this one, I think the problem is when I did my Knights of Fire review a couple years ago, one of my longtime viewers said, yeah, it looks interesting. Not for me. It's too close to me. It's too close to home. Basically, the whole Legolas, for me, the memory is still too near kind of thing. And that really kind of caught me off guard a bit, because it made me think about this. I live in an area where, thank God, we haven't ever had to deal with war-torn conditions in this part of the world, something I should never take for granted. Whereas other people have had to. They've had to see this through the eyes of the very ground beneath them being a battleground at some point. And so that really kind of made me rethink it when it came to the historical aspect. Days of Ire features real people that didn't survive. It features real people that were hunted down and killed, lives destroyed, families destroyed, land and property absconded with, photos burned and destroyed so that they could hide evidence to relationships to try and keep safe those who didn't make it out. Like, this is real, and Days of Ire kind of opens my eyes to that in a lot of ways. At its core, it's a straightforward game. But again, I feel more like playing a story than a game. It's not something I'm going to pull out for casual night to go, okay, now the bunko's over, let's play a game about this. Not going to happen. But you know what? I give it a solid marks for gameplay and big marks for really tapping into a part of history that I'm glad I now know and am aware of. If nothing else, no matter how history ended up unraveling, the one thing that those people depicted in the story knew was that no matter how bleak the initial outcome to the world for them, the blood of their memory remains no longer unobserved. And with that, thanks again, and we'll see you next time on Harebrained Games.